So the Brooklyn Nets this season are fighting the inevitable rebuild, as they stated that they were looking to add on pieces to their team, and I think there's a cultural clash with the Brooklyn Nets ownership, particularly Joe Tsai, him not understanding the New York City market, particularly Brooklyn. Because for one, the Brooklyn Nets as a franchise is not a destination, especially for top tier players. And I'm speaking as a native New Yorker, a person that grew up in Brooklyn in the same exact neighborhood where that stadium is at. There is a major disconnect from the way this whole Brooklyn Nets roll out from not only Joe Tsai, but the previous Brooklyn Nets owner as to what this team should look like and what should be the characteristics of this franchise. As the previous owner put together a team that looked like the Boston Celtics when the Nets initially had transitioned into Brooklyn, was not a good look. And a lot of this disconnect from these last two international owners of the Nets may have come from the league maybe possibly putting these guys in a position where they can't buy into the league. Instead, they could buy a team. Because it's always been said that Joe Tsai was trying to buy his way into owning a certain percentage within the NBA, but the league is privately owned and they would have to accept you. So they're not taking investment dollars from anybody. But a way Joe Tsai found a way in is by buying the Brooklyn Nets. Same thing for Prokhorov, their previous Russian billionaire owner. But them actually not being from the States, they have a lack of understanding of just overall the market that they're in. And for Joe Tsai to side with Sean Marks over Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, that may have just been a recipe for disaster, because the Brooklyn Nets are not a destination for those top tier players. And there is a financial component to this situation as well. Joe Tsai purchased this team for $2 billion at the end of 2019. And of course, with the pandemic coming around and the newly acquisitions of Kevin Durant along with Kyrie Irving, not only ballooned his payroll, and it also hampered his ability to monetize that franchise due to the pandemic. So by the time the 2021-22 season came around, that was really Joe Tsai's first opportunity to monetize that team in full by being able to sell tickets and have access to fans directly. And besides the $2 billion he paid for the Nets, he also paid $1 billion for the Barclays Center. And I knew something would be up eventually when I heard Joe Tsai complaining how the Nets was costing him a lot of money, especially for the impending luxury tax that he had to pay for after acquiring James Harden. And behind the scenes, the Brooklyn Nets were actually going through a lot of executives from the sales department all the way up to the CEO of the Brooklyn Sports Entertainment that was in charge of all the endorsements and organizing all the events for the Barclays Center. The person that he eventually let go had a very well-built resume, as he spent 4 years at Madison Square Garden as the VP of ticketing. So he sold suites to corporations and also got sponsorships for the Knicks and the Rangers. And as we all know, Madison Square Garden is reining in with the money when it comes to the ticket sales. So Joe Tsai, with that payroll that he had for his Nets players, actually had to make the similar amount of money the Knicks and the Warriors were making just to break even. Once again, him as an international person, he must assume he's in the New York market, that he has access to a large audience, but not understanding that the Nets have done a poor job since the previous ownership of establishing themselves in a market that's pretty much already dominated by the Knicks. Once again, I'm speaking on this as a native New Yorker that's from Brooklyn. A lot of people who support the Nets are transplant, as the borough is going through a transition from the old gritty days of the 90s to more gentrified parts, and there's an influx of people from different places. So that audience, which is relatively small compared to the rest of the city, are the ones that are pretty much flocking into that Nets arena and supporting the team when they had mega stars. They're the same fan bases that would hop from the Golden State Warriors to the Cavs, back to the Warriors, and then on to another dynasty. But even when the Nets had James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving, and the New York Knicks started rising in the standings with Julius Randle and RJ Barrett and an old Derrick Rose, just them getting a hint of relevance actually made the Brooklyn Nets irrelevant in the rest of the city. See, in the national media, they spoke about the Nets nonstop. But in New York City, the word on the street was always about the Knicks. Once again, Joe Tsai does not understand his market. And now you're starting to see the results of the Nets not establishing a fan base. When the stars leave, so does the customers. And the beat writer that has been covering the Nets since they came to Brooklyn spoke on this. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, check in.
As someone who covered this team back when it moved to Brooklyn 12 years ago, it is jarring how much things have degraded, at least how it feels anyway, from an atmosphere standpoint here. It just doesn't feel like there's any fans really for the Nets at all at these games. Like, you come every night and the visiting team is getting massive cheers compared to the home team. And whenever Kyrie made a shot, the cheers were a lot louder than the handful of boos he was getting from the home fans. I don't think it's because there was like a massive amount of Nets fans cheering for Kyrie. I think there were a lot of Mavs fans here cheering for Kyrie and Luka. And it's just sort of what it's been like on a nightly basis of late. And it made for kind of a weird atmosphere. I mean, perhaps the funniest part was, last week when Kevin was here, they did a, welcome back video and a nice little tribute. Today, they just do welcome back to Kyrie, to Seth Curry, who played like a year and a half here, played like 80 games, and Markieff Morris, who played 27 games here. Had them all like lumped in together. Welcome back, guys.
It's definitely not surprising at all. Most New Yorkers understand a lot of the Nets fan base in highly gentrified Brooklyn was mostly transplants. And it became very obvious when the Knicks had made the playoffs in the 2020-21 season. Once again, the Nets had James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant, and just locally wasn't more relevant than the Knicks being led by Julius Randle heading into the playoffs versus the Hawks. And listen again to how this beat writer describes, these were not Kyrie fans, these were Maverick fans, and it's like this from night to night. The Nets low-key are in the business of just selling tickets to see other team stars. Joe Tsai may not realize that right now, but currently, this is the business model of the Nets. And this beat writer describes it perfectly to a T.
It just doesn't feel like there's any fans really for the Nets at all at these games. Like, you come every night and the visiting team is getting massive cheers compared to the home team. And whenever Kyrie made a shot, the cheers were a lot louder than the handful of boos he was getting from the home fans. I don't think it's because there was like a massive amount of Nets fans cheering for Kyrie. I think there were a lot of Mavs fans here cheering for Kyrie and Luka. And it's just sort of what it's been like on a nightly basis of late. And it made for kind of a weird atmosphere.
Again, this is what happens when you don't establish a fan base. Just like how KD, Kyrie, and James Harden were transplanted into Brooklyn and quickly left, so did the fan base. And Joe Tsai and the Nets front office have to realize that their franchise has to establish a characteristic, an identity, similar to the Green Bay Packers with the Cheeseheads or the Oakland Raiders as being rebels, as being tough. They don't have to do the same exact branding, but at least those teams have characteristics. Same thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those teams have characteristics that represent the city, and they can't just rely on the word Brooklyn being cool and hoping that it sells itself. And when you really look back, the 2018-2019 Brooklyn Nets with D'Angelo Russell and that whole bench just setting trends with the dancing, that's the most Brooklyn that team ever was. They were young, fun, and setting trends. If Joe Tsai and the Brooklyn Nets were smart, they would look back at that team and start drawing up their blueprint from there. And it's probably going to require them to sell off Mikal Bridges, who's 27 years old already, get those picks from the Rockets, or just get whatever you can from any other team and start over. Get a good draft pick and build his character within Brooklyn and start establishing characteristics of what that franchise will be.